Okay, so friends and enemies, welcome to the Forensic Focus podcast. A live outside broadcast, not live. Well, it's live for us. It's not live for you. You're watching it pre-recorded. We're still alive. An outside broadcast today, coming from Stavanger in Norway, where I've been at the European Interdisciplinary Cybersecurity conference for the last 2 days, and enjoying the very generous hospitality of the Norwegians, which is wonderful. And yeah, it's been really good. Everything in Stavanger is uphill. It's built on so Stavanger is built on granite. Okay, I think it's granite, but it's volcanic, whatever it is. It's heavy, juicy stuff. And at the beginning of the conference, they were like, there will be some explosions because we're doing building work. And I was like, okay, I thought this was perhaps an English thing, because obviously, you know, we speak English fluently and we take it for granted that everybody else in the world speaks English fluently. I thought, oh, maybe they just mean bangs, you know, just like sort of some percussive noises. No, they are literally blasting the rock away with dynamite to put foundations in. And about halfway through someone's talk, there is an almighty explosion. The room shakes. And it's like a bomb has gone off next door, because a bomb has gone off next door, literally, to blow away the rock for the foundations. It's spectacular noises.
You couldn't kind of be doing that at an American conference. It'd be everyone would have their guns out.
Yeah. The guys from the university kind of just shrugged and carried on. It was like, this is regular. We're used to this.
So it's interesting, the title of the conference. Like, what do they mean by interdisciplinary in cyber? Like, how are they defining that?
I think the key thing here was that mostly it was across all areas of what we would consider to be cybersecurity. I think there was a little bit of interaction from social sciences, especially when we were talking about medical devices. There was a very good talk given about medical devices and medical device security and the perceptions of risk. Yeah, in fact, I was actually talking very specifically about the Norwegian system, which was very interesting. I will link all of the papers, and I will put all of the names of the people who gave the talks. And I am not going to try and pronounce them on here because it would only be offensive in the long run.
So digging into that medical stuff, are they like external risks, or like risks that firmware could be corrupted and then cause problems? Like, was it?
No, in this case, actually, it's very simple. This was more about just on the simple front, who the hell's responsible for it? Mm-hmm. Because they are, and then this was the lady who gave it is a social scientist and the consultant in Norwegian Medicare, and we were just talking about the sort of the home alert type stuff. So the elderly have a bracelet they can press the button on and it will alert.
Yeah.
But there's no standardization for their implementation. There's no consistent rollout across the states. They don't know who's responsible for it, whether it's an IT thing, because it's an IoT. Some of them are IoT devices. Or is it a healthcare thing that the responder is responsible for making sure it works? There's a lot of human factors around what one would consider to be the security implications of it, purely on an availability front. But also then getting into so it is an IP based device now. Typically, it's on a network. Is that network secure? It's a home network of an individual. Who's responsible for securing that?
Yeah.
What level of education should we be putting down? That was a very interesting discussion. There was another sub-track, which is, he says, looking on. They've conveniently given the acronym, but not the translation. It's COSH, which was to do with children. Anyway, but actually it was more to do with cybersecurity education for children, and things like parental control on mobile phones and tablets and things like that. And that, again, fascinating. And the idea is essentially that a lot of this parental control software is granular enough. It's block everything or allow everything. It's not got that fine tuning capability, especially to allow a child to develop.
Yeah.
Locking down a 6-year-old is one thing, locking down a 16-year-old is another, and there needs to be a finer understanding of how to better implement this software. And again, they've been doing research on that. There was a cybersecurity board game that a different paper about how to better educate on cybersecurity. And interestingly, they'd actually targeted that one at both children and parents.
I think
because lots of parents aren't.
Yeah, I think that's valid though, right? Like, kids can't teach themselves everything, and especially contextual, like safety online. I just looked up COSH, Child Online Safety and Harms.
Thank you.
What is that?
Yeah. So that was part of that, and again, very interesting to hear people coming from a social science background and describing the research that they've done and how they found the reactions to be. And interesting, it was like they actually did play testing with this game and with getting families in to come and sit down and. Mm-hmm. It was the children. There were examples of the children teaching the parents about information security rather than the other way around, and stuff like that. So one kid was teaching his mum about the padlock icon in the browser and stuff like this.
Oh, yeah.
For us, we consider that to be a relatively common knowledge, but out in the real world, it's a different kettle of fish. So like that, it was a really good mix internationally.
Okay.
A few UK universities turned up. There was a representative from Oxford. I didn't actually speak to him, but there was a guy from Oxford, according to his name tag. A couple of people from the University of Kent here, and then Norwegians. There were from Italian universities and German universities. A couple of Americans as well, which was interesting for a European conference. They had come over. A few of the delegates not presenting, but there was a guy from Canada who'd come over and had he brought his mum with him, and they were going off to do a bit of sightseeing and visiting relatives, I think, as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Croatian guys, they were really good fun. Shout out to them. We had dinner together. We sat together at the conference dinner, and really good crack. They were fabulous. As was the Irish delegate. She was she had a good sense of humour as well. So it was a very pleasant time.
I love that. I was going to say, I love how like the international turnout for a Europe conference it's because like so many of the countries are only an hour or two away.
Yeah,
which is like really good for diversity in the conference because each country is doing their own thing in cyber. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And the research topics were hugely vast. I mean, one of them was to do with. Interestingly, the University of Kent one was to do one of their. They gave two talks. One was on the prevalence of child sexual abuse material on sale on the dark web, and they had trod a very careful ethical line about following this up. But they researched two languages. They did English or English language dark web marketplaces, and they did Chinese. Because the student who was doing it was Chinese and thus could handle the the language differences. And the findings were fascinating, in so much as they didn't find any CSAM for sale in English language marketplaces. Now, I need to have a conversation to find out how they chose their marketplaces, because I find it kind of fundamentally unlikely. But it's a master's thesis, not a state of the absolute statement
Yeah.
about the quality of the world. But the Chinese ones were definitely there. But one of the things they did find, interestingly, was just in the terms and conditions of the marketplaces. All of the English language ones specifically prohibited it, whereas that wasn't the way in the Chinese marketplaces. It wasn't a specific prohibition from the terms and conditions to say you cannot upload child sexual abuse material into here. But they did a
I
lot.
wonder
I mean,
if
it was a long.
that's. I wonder if that's like a I don't want to say cultural, but like law enforcement thing where in like the States and the Western world, it's hunted after quite a lot, and those marketplaces don't want to be shut down by like the FBI and the UK police and the Australian police, whereas maybe China doesn't have like that body in their legal system to chase that stuff.
Yeah, maybe. The paper I'll link again to the papers.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to read.
I'm
assuming all the papers are open to read for free, similar to.
I believe they are. I will double check and upload. A lot of them were putting QR codes on their slides to say, come here and download our paper, which of course none of us followed because none of us QR codes. But yeah, so many of them were. At the other end of the spectrum, there was a guy talking about covert channel communications from very low bandwidth IoT sensors, and just sensors. So effectively temperature sensors or whatever, and how you could sort of compress and stuff into binary floating point representations to get it to transmit covert data across the network, which was fascinating and I'm sure has some very interesting real world applications out there somewhere, not particularly related to forensics, but I wouldn't want to have to reverse engineer that one particularly, because it would be problematic. So yeah, it was a good mix. A good range of stuff, good range of presenters, all, and again, you have people standing up and apologizing for their English, and you're like, feel free to do it in Spanish, and I will not understand a single word you say. You are doing me an absolute, standing, and there was not a problem with.
It just reminds me. It reminds me of the meme though of like, people get up and apologize for their English being poor, but it's probably better than 70% of English speakers anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been an absolute pleasure to sit and listen to throughout. Just on a conference level, I have never been to such a well catered conference. The university put out that I turned up on day one. I shouldn't have eaten at the hotel, basically, because there were platters of fruit. I mean, I did send photos onto Twitter, I think. I'll include. I'll be writing this up in a more formal report for Forensic Focus at a later. Well, I'll be doing it on the plane on the way home today, but I'll put photos in it, and there's huge platters of fruit there with it's stunning. Coffee was more than palatable, which is rare. But lunch, they took us out of the conference. We walked 200 yards, if that, to the university canteen, and there was a hot meal on the first day. A buffet with some really, really good food. We then, after the conference finished, they'd arranged. So the university owns they have an Iron Age farm, which they've reconstructed, and as part, so living archaeology, basically.
Yeah.
which is again, it was 500 yards up the hill, and we had a private tour around this Iron Age longhouse after the conference finished, before we went to the conference dinner, which was stunning, fascinating, stunning. They took us down to one of the finest hotels in Stavanger, and Stavanger it's a fairly significant port in the sense that it's got a lot of the Norwegian oil industry here.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be a particularly big town, but it has a lot of importance. I think so. They were saying that sort of like Norway only has about a population of about 5.5 million people. So it's not exactly, London is
Yeah.
larger than Norway is.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly small town in that respect. But it's an important town, and this is like the oldest hotel. They have won awards for their French cuisine internationally, beating out the French possibly, for their French cooking. There was a Frenchman sitting next to me at dinner, who we more or less mercilessly taunted throughout the entire thing about this fact that Norwegians had better French food than the French did. So we have been so well looked after here, genuinely. I mean, absolutely fantastically. And just as a sort of a universal truth, I have found everybody that I have spoken to who is Norwegian, A, perfectly fluent in English, and B, very pleasant, very lovely, and immensely helpful. So
Yeah, I was just
I'd recommend it.
Yeah, the conference itself. So while when we were starting this a bit before, I was looking at the website that they have, and it's actually like one of the better websites I've seen academic conferences put together, in terms of just being able to like navigate it. The information is, all of it seems up to date, which I rarely find across academic conferences. Like there's a conference coming up that I was going to go to, and it got postponed, but it wasn't posted anywhere. So just stuff like that, like because it's not a business, they're like, it's usually not the first thing that people think of. But yeah, it looks really good. But I guess going back to the talks, like if you could pick maybe your favorite talk that you saw, and then maybe one that you read about or people were talking about that you wished that you kind of made it to, but there was other stuff that you wanted to go see.
Now, it's been quite interesting. Although there are sort of 3 tracks, a majority of the conference was delivered in a single track.
Okay, yeah, so there wasn't too much overlap. So that's pretty good.
So there wasn't too much overlap. The thing is that I went and listened to the things I wanted to listen to in the tracks, so I did very well on that front. And I went off and I listened to the Kosh stuff, as opposed to staying for. It was a lot of digital energy stuff.
DP4I, which is the digital
so
privacy for industry applications. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what was quite interesting is we came out of that, and then the DP4I panel session actually was more of a free-form conversation about the concepts of privacy versus the benefits of being part of a digital infrastructure, so sort of like energy or healthcare or whatever, and because it was a much more open discussion, we actually talked about, I think, all of the things that were sort of discussed in the in those talks, sort of live and in person. So it was quite a good way to not have missed out on the topic as a whole. For me,
the last one there, I'm just reading the titles for the digital privacy one. The first 2 kind of make sense, but then the last one's titled "Cyber Physical Hardening of Digital Water Infrastructure." Just from the title, doesn't seem to fit with privacy, but maybe there was a core piece in it that did.
Yeah, maybe. I think it may have been more about the infrastructure side of things than necessarily the privacy side of things, if you see what I mean.
Mm.
There was quite an interesting one that was a bit earlier on. Actually, yeah. Just slightly further up in the main track was privacy preserving data analysis with the encode, shuffle, analyze architecture, and vehicular data sharing. Wow.
Okay.
So that was given by a guy from one of the German universities, Gothenburg, I think, and they did some quite interesting analysis of tracking vehicles and how things like EVs and charging data and all sorts of stuff like that was there, and how they were able to anonymize personal data in order to still gain benefit from statistical analysis, because obviously you want to have the ability to see, okay, where should I put my charging points? Where are the cars going that is beneficial to me to know that it would be better to have more charging points here, or I need to improve infrastructure. So you do need to track vehicles. You do need to do that. It's just, how do you do that in a way? And they're talking about the anonymizing functions that they were applying to data, so that they could still maintain the shape of a data set, but without actually necessarily having an individual tracking within that. So that was quite good.
I wonder if that's an interesting topic to talk about with researchers and getting data sets like that, because it's probably not something that's talked about much, but it kind of is a Venn diagram of offensive data scientists and open source intelligence. And if you have someone or a team that overlaps the two, and you had that data set, you could probably reverse it. Same with like marketing data, how we're all meant to be a number, but someone with enough knowledge and will to do it can reverse engineer your marketing number to figure out what your buying patterns are. And probably the same with the cars, right? Like they could probably map it out where you live based on your data set. I like thinking about it, like I know I've probably seen like a talk probably on like one of those fitness apps kind of things, like trying to track people down based on their fitness habits, but I'm sure it's for all this kind of stuff, especially like the smarter and smarter cars get, where they're reporting back information all the time.
Yeah. In an interesting aside on that, I was talking to one of the delegates about forensics, and they had ended up being roped into doing forensics because the forensics team had basically retired, and not being a particularly large country, there wasn't an immediate replacement. But they ended up doing quite a significant piece on they were analysing car computers in road traffic collisions here. And there was basically one guy who had been an expert in doing this, who had been falsifying data, and they uncovered this by discovering some anomalies in the data, and then going back, and apparently it sort of undid a number of convictions that some people have been charged with murder, vehicular murder, basically, or death by dangerous driving or whatever, that were no longer sound prosecutions on the grounds that this data had been heavily manipulated. So it's definitely an area of research that has value. The vehicular.
Was he purposefully falsifying data? Like
it seems that way, yeah. Although that was the impression that I got. The question of why he had done it didn't come up, unfortunately, because I would love to know whether it was in a deliberate attempt to frame people that he thought were guilty or should have been guilty, or whether it was just whether it wasn't deliberate but was just he wasn't as much of an expert as he thought he was, and had altered the data in the process in such a way that made it invalid, or so unfortunately I didn't get to follow up on that one,
because I guess that's like that hits on a lot of talks we've done, like both us and with guests before, about understanding the data and the interpretation of the data, particularly used in court cases. And if you're kind of considered the only specialist in your field, like, how does anyone contest that?
Yeah.
That is
yeah.
a very hard thing.
Yeah, and again, I spent some time explaining to a few people sort of the way that the English legal system works with regard to the evidence that I give, and whether it's effectively problematic to work for the defence, because it isn't. It's I tell the truth. I don't have any obligation to come up with some way of getting people off. It's just basically a quality control check on the prosecution stuff. And people were interested to hear that that's the way that it does work, or should work anyway.
So they don't. They don't have like opposing sides over there in terms of like reviewing data.
No, I mean, I think it was more along the lines of people don't really think about criminal justice until it comes to apply to them. And because it was a multidisciplinary conference, lots of people weren't actually particularly experienced in forensics. So
yeah, okay.
So that was interesting. There was quite a lot of research that was based around malware. That was another thing that we sort of saw from an incident response side. I think probably my favourite paper, or certainly the one that gave me the most thought, was to do with malware analysis. They were taking malware binaries and doing a conversion of malware binaries to images. I mean, images as in pictures. So basically figuring out a way to represent the code and presenting it as an image, and then putting them into machine vision systems to allow you to spot malware families and programs by a visual analysis. And the actual paper was about how there could potentially be attacks against doing that, which was interesting in its own right. But just the overall concept was actually remarkably successful. They were getting sort of detection rates at sort of 95, 96% for different families of malware.
It's got I'm pretty sure it's not novel. I think I forget what is. You can like sub hash functions as well, and that's like similar type of research. So you can like group malware families based on like the sub hashes of the binary itself to figure out what's happening. I forget what it's called, but I'll find like a write up on it, and because I'm pretty sure that stuff's been around for a while, but they're probably like applying new statistical models or something to.
Well, it was more against the application of attacks against it in the same way as you can attack computer vision systems. And
get around the detection.
Yeah. So that was what the actual paper was on, but it was overall it was an interesting concept.
That's cool.
There was quite a good one on. Actually, it was a very early one on. I think it was the first one, in fact. Doing device detecting device fingerprinting. So obviously you connect to a service, or you connect to an application, or using an application, and it has value in the privacy invading sense of identifying you as a singular person. And by doing device fingerprinting, battery life and browser version and all of this kind of stuff. And there are a number of libraries currently available that allow you to do to put into your code that will allow you to do device fingerprinting. But they've come up with basically a generic way of detecting device fingerprinting programs as a whole through API hooking to see what is being called, and they have found, and fairly, to a certain extent, fairly logically, you see a program call a lot of API hooks to do with a lot of the system very quickly after initialization. But actually, it's good work. It shows that this is the way that they function and it is detectable. You would have to deliberately be stealthy about your collection and spread it out. But even then, you would be calling way more APIs than an average program would. So it would still be quite obvious that you were doing some sort of device fingerprinting.
Yeah. You would then be going into the realms of code obfuscation, where like malware itself calls a lot of, like, talking about just Windows systems, will call a lot of APIs, and there are ways around to obfuscate it, but it's more work for the author to do that. So I guess if companies are like, well, you have to sign up for our service and we're going to fingerprint you anyway, they're not really going to worry about obfuscation.
Yeah, it's an interesting area, and it's always the thing, isn't it? Is either you're paying for a service or you're paying for the service by providing your data so that they can sell it on to somebody else. So,
or in the case with Apple, both.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah, indeed. What else was there that was good?
So did you get, like, is there any kind of people that we're going to talk to coming out from what we've talked about, that we can get them on the podcast and talk more about their research?
Yeah, possibly. I'm not going to commit to it yet because I haven't got enough time to talk to them. But probably a couple of the ones from the University of Kent, and probably we'll see about some of the that malware piece. The image one, I'd quite like to have a conversation about further, because I think it's an interesting application going forward. I think because the research was based around the avoidance of it, I think that there are wider implications for things like the triage work that we consider part of forensics, and how we could manipulate CSAM images, for example, in a way that would make them fail triage tests. We're moving towards AI-based or machine learning-based triage, and if we're able to obfuscate images in a way that doesn't fundamentally change the way that they look, but changes their perception to a machine learning system, that's actually quite a big problem. So that's something to consider going forwards. So we'll see. We'll have. I've got a few contacts. I've got a few other things. Oh yeah, one of the other interesting talks was actually to do with again, machine learning. Lots of machine learning stuff. But they were doing these were the Croatians. Their paper was on age classification from images, just like this, a screenshot of me, how old am I? And the answer is clearly 150. But yeah, but they had massive data training sets, 600,000 images that they were using that had, assigned ages on. And what they found when I rather unfairly cross-examined them after their talk in the questions, but they were getting their results on average across the entire thing were about 6 years out. And now, if you're talking about a 15-year-old between being 21 and 9, that's bad. But actually, what they found was that in from the 0 to 25, they could get it to within a year.
Okay.
It's just that the average across the entire space, basically, if you're a man, once you're over 75, they haven't got a clue. You might as well take a guess. 75 plus is it. They found that basically women 25 to 45, they couldn't really tell because I don't know why. I mean, but that was the finding. I guess it probably has something to do with makeup.
Did they have any statistical significance on ethnicity? Because I know that's usually a big problem with image recognition software, is the difference between like African American versus Caucasian versus
Yeah.
an Asian descent background is they struggle a
It
lot.
didn't come up in the in any of the questioning, and I don't recall this in the paper. But yeah, absolutely, it's I've seen that as well, because again, the data training sets um, tend to be biased towards Caucasians. What was quite interesting was that they found that there was a mark. Well, I'm gonna say it kind of makes sense when you think about it, but there's a marked improvement if you are looking at a female and you train only on female images, and if you're training on a male and train only on male images, rather than using either
Mixed
gender
data
with
set.
a mixed data set. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes sense when you consider it, but actually, it's a valid finding to say, okay, well, if we're going to try and use this in a age categorization sense for a useful purpose, and to be fair, rather pleasantly, they went, instead of the usual CSAM, they went selling cigarettes. It's like, oh, countries that still smoke, and yeah, so that was my question. Was like, hang on, you've got a 7-year age gap, and you wanted to stop under 15s from buying cigarettes. That's not really going to pan out, is it? And they were like, no, it's about a year in
Yeah.
the age
Right.
groups that matter. So that was cool. So yeah, that was good. That was good. I really enjoyed that
Cool.
one. So yeah, it was good. They're running another conference later in the year. Stavanger University is running another conference later in the year. It's a bit more general IT research,
Mm-hmm.
and although there are security and there are pedagogical in the sense of teaching tracks in it, I don't think I mean, much as I would love to come, because I'd love to come back here, it's it's not one that I think we can really justify
Yeah.
attending.
More outside of
But
the
anybody
scope
who
of
is
what we cover.
interested, yeah. But what I do have to say is that being here has been fantastic. Apparently, this is like the best weather that they ever have, which I'm not going to complain about. So it's about 20, 23, 24, maybe 25 degrees outside. It's beautiful, sunny.
Mm.
But for me, the biggest thing is like we're far enough north that basically the sun sets somewhere close to midnight and is up again at 4 a.m. So I
Oh
flew
yeah.
in. I flew into the airport at about 11 o'clock, and it was daylight. It was broad daylight. You could see everything. I drove to the hotel. I got a taxi to the hotel when I got through customs, who were astonishingly strict. Where
Yeah.
are you going? Why are you here? Um, when are you leaving? Okay, hang on. And yeah, I got to the hotel, and first of all, if you've been to England, I'm sure, but I don't know what Australian licensing laws are like. But in England, pubs close at 11. That's it. You can't get a drink after that. Forget it.
Mm.
Turned up at the hotel. Bars still full. People are still drinking. I got myself a drink, and I checked in, went to my room, put my bags down. We came back downstairs, got a drink, went and sat outside, and it was daylight. It was gone midnight. Okay, it was twilight. But it felt like 6:30 in the UK, and it was just like this is so bizarre.
That sounds awesome
Um,
though.
it's great. It's great because we went out and had the conference dinner, and then went and sat outside on the harbour and had another drink, as if it was mid-afternoon. It is really, but the conference this coming up is in September, and they're like, no, it's starting to get a bit dark and cold. Then it's like, yeah, that's more like the Norway that
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
have in
guess like
mind.
on the flip side, like winter would be miserable, where it's just
Yeah,
like dark when you get up, dark when you get home,
yeah, yeah.
limited sunlight.
I think the only mitigating factor is at least here you get proper snow,
Mm.
unlike England, where it's dark when you get up, dark when you get home, and it's miserably wet the rest of the time and cold, as opposed to actually having something nice to look at when the sun is
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But then just as a sort of, I'll probably finish off. There were two keynotes, one on each day. The first one, the first keynote, and again, I'll put the names in because I'll get it wrong. It was Tor. I know his name was Tor. The first name was Tor. I sat next to him at the conference dinner. But he's actually a very famous Norwegian mathematician. I know no mathematicians, and therefore this unfortunately means very little to me. But he was actually talking about sort of the history of cryptography in Norway, and that was utterly fascinating and very good to listen to because it was a historical lecture. The mathematics of it was less, and therefore it wasn't as painful for me as it could have been. The second talk, the second keynote, again, I won't try with the names, but it was given by a Greek gentleman. He couldn't make it to the conference because he's been appointed the interim minister for something in Greece, apparently.
Okay.
So he gave the talk as a video link, and but again, that was an interesting one, talking about machine learning and cybersecurity. So again, a topic that you and I have talked about quite a lot, and the risks of attack against it. So I have a copy of that video, and I will see if I'm allowed to distribute it. But if not, I will make a more thorough appraisal of its contents and write it up.
Yeah, sounds good.
So like that, yeah.
It looks like a really good conference.
It is. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed. It was incredibly well run, and very smooth, and you know, explosions aside, seamless. The people were pleasant. It's been fun. Everybody was interesting. Yeah, it's been good. It was it was. Next year it's in Greece, so I may attend again. somewhere in Macedonia. So we'll see. But I valued it. I learned things. I came away with new ideas, and you know, I have been very well looked after while I've been here. All the flyers that I put out disappeared. All the lens cloths I put out disappeared.
Oh, nice.
So, you know,
yeah.
I've had a few LinkedIn requests and things like that. So yeah, it's been worthwhile, I'd say. Jamie, it was value for money. That's what
yeah, I think for the listeners, if so, just quickly for the listeners, if they don't know, we made flyers for potential speakers that we can give out at conferences and just information on the podcast, right?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, we can link to that, can't we? We must have a digital copy somewhere. We'll put a link in the.
Oh yeah, if it's not, we'll get someone to chuck it on the podcast page of when she gets back. We won't be mean when she gets back from holiday.
Yeah, no, that's kind. It's so expensive here. That's the only thing. I sort of after dinner I bought one round of drinks, 4 drinks, and that was about 40 quid, £40, so 45 euros. I don't know what that translates to in Australian dollars, but it's a lot.
That's about how much it would cost you to buy around in Australia in major cities.
Yeah.
Maybe yeah. I've been out and it's like $19 a beer.
90? Okay. Oh, well, yeah. I just obviously live a reclusive life. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I only buy bottles and drink at home now. Like, work remote, go out remote, party remote.
Yeah.
The only time I'm out is at conferences, and usually there's some kind of free grog.
Yeah, well, there's again, you know, the conference dinner, we had champagne to start, and red, and then white with the meal, and yeah, no, it ran out too quickly, but you know what it's like.
Yeah.
So yeah, only one other piece of news that I came across this morning to share with you. Apparently, we are doing better as a podcast than Meghan Markle and Harry.
That's not surprising.
They have finalised with their agreement with Spotify, and they're leaving, and the $20 million that Spotify put down for them appears to have gotten them 12 episodes. So
Okay.
I feel that we are definitely doing better there.
I mean, feel free for Spotify to reach out and give us that kind of money
Yeah,
for 12
I'd
episodes.
say yeah. We have to keep the branding, JB. We do care.
Yeah.
But if
We
Spotify
can
does want to
turn
come, that's fine.
for Spotify for that amount of money. I reckon we can convince for just the podcast to turn the forensic focus icon green just to match Spotify. But we keep forensic focus.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds good. I quite like this conference update at site. I think it's one we'll have to make sure we keep because
because you don't forget stuff. Because I forgot heaps after I came back when I was trying to write the review. But doing the update while I was there was really good.
Yeah. Nothing else. We can go back and listen to it and refresh your own memory. Yeah, I'm going to say, what can we say to close out on? Well, we've got quite a few recordings coming up in the near future. We have, I discovered another one drop into my inbox this morning that Zoe had arranged, which is nice. So
Chris Vance from Magnet Forensics is coming on to talk about mobile forensics. You've got one coming up?
I've got one with Amped and Martino Gerian coming up, talking about EU and video, or the EU Parliament and video and evidence being given. We have Professor Sarah Morris coming on to talk about all sorts of interesting things. She's very much an up-and-coming rock star of forensic computing in the UK academic community. She's brilliant as well, great sense of humour and fantastic to talk to. And has done some very interesting things with devices that are non-standard, shall we say? So we'll save those for when she actually comes on. So we've got a couple of really interesting.
The last one coming up is the students' experience in education systems for cyber coming up. So both Si and I have managed to make some friends, and we have one each coming on the show, so there'll be 4 of us talking through, the mature learning pathway for cybersecurity in a couple of different formats and from different countries' perspectives, which will be really cool.
Yeah, that'll be good. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. Intriguingly, the friends that we both made seem to work for the same company in different countries.
Yeah. We won't mention it too much, just in case they don't want to reveal it, but it was funny how it worked out. And then they both had interesting pathways, which will be really cool to dig into to figure out how they got there as well. So that'd be really cool.
So there's plenty to come back and listen to in future. Even if you think us yakking on about conferences isn't that great, I think it's great. It's cool. So it's living vicariously through somebody else's conference attendance.
I'm really hungry, and I feel like a drink now after listening to you talk about that conference.
Well, I'm off to spend my last day. Stavanger is a major enough city to have its own airport, but it's not a major enough city to have regular flights to and from London. So I have most of the day to look around before I have to worry about getting on a plane. So I'm off to take a look around the old town and visit a couple of museums, hopefully before having to head off to the airport. And It's such beautiful weather here.
Yeah, it looks like it in the background, like nice and sunny still, and it's morning for you, right, over there?
Yeah, it's just coming up to 9 o'clock.
Okay, yeah.
In here, according to my watch, it's just coming up to 8 o'clock, which was the reason I was late to this podcast. Being an hour ahead of the UK. So I've got most of the day, which will be fantastic. I don't need to head off till my flight late afternoon. So
awesome. Well, mate, enjoy the rest of your trip in Norway and safe travels back. And thanks all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the Forensic Focus podcast, where we covered a conference that Sai has recently gone to. If you've liked this, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what else you want to hear about, and we'll catch you guys next time. See ya.
See ya. Thanks, guys.